Hello there, this is the Nerd Man, and I'm going to be reviewing the top 50 WWE superstars of all time. By now, pretty much everyone knows that the DVD is pretty much a fucking joke. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's obviously, there's a lot of politics played into it, and I'm going to mention where I think some particular politics have been played in terms of the positioning of WWE superstars and why. I'm someone who's fairly knowledgeable about wrestling, at least from the 70s onwards. So I'm fairly knowledgeable, So there are some superstars that I don't know that much about, or I've just heard the name of. So if I come across a superstar like that, I will, mention it. Okay, so straight onto the list. So we've got Killer Kowalski at number 50. Don't know much about him, but I do know he trained Triple H, and I know Triple H is a massive politics player. So I have a sneaking suspicion there's something going on there. But I don't know enough about him to really say. Batista shouldn't be on the list. Definitely shouldn't be on the list. Hasn't been in the WWE long enough. Didn't make the kind of impact. And also, I mean, one of the things I have to mention is surely when WWE was at its height, the characters who were in the WWE or in wrestling when it was at its height should take precedence over those who weren't who were in the WWE during their low points, unless those wrestlers had a special affinity with audiences. So I will carry on. So Batista shouldn't be on the list. Rick Rude. Now he was a great heel, one of the greatest of all time. I would actually put him higher on my list. He is actually one of my favorites of all time, so maybe I'm being a bit, maybe I'm being, what's the word, a bit biased. But on the other hand, the first time you see Ravishing Rick Rude, you will remember him forever. The first time you see a Ravishing Rick Rude promo to enter, to all you sweat hogs and, down and out alcoholics and whatever he used to say to the people, he was just one of the best heels and had one of the biggest heel reactions you'll ever hear. Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund is someone whose career I didn't follow much, but I think he should be on the list. I could argue he shouldn't, but all in all, I think it would be unobjective to put somebody who was a WWE champion for as long as he was off the list. Plus, he's made some appearances since, which were relatively entertaining. So, Dory Funk Jr., don't know enough about him. Jeff Hardy, I think he should be on the list. I think 45 is, sorry, I should give you the numbers. So, Jeff Hardy's 45. I think he should be on the list. A lot of people argue that he shouldn't, but I think he definitely was memorable, and I didn't like him so much during his time in WWE. I was much more of a Dudley Boys fan. But the Hardy Boys definitely were megastars, and they always got a huge pop. And they were in wrestling at a time when it was most successful and put on some of the most classic matches, or were part of some of the most classic matches, even if they weren't my favourites. And Jeff Hardy was definitely the superstar and the charismatic one you remembered of the both of them. I personally didn't like him though. Nick Bockwinkel, somebody I think should possibly be on the list if he can be put on the list. If there's space for him, yes, he should be on the list. Kane, just because Nick Bockwinkel, who was 44, was one of the great talkers. Kane shouldn't be on the list. I'm sorry. Like him a lot, like his character a lot. Although he was there during a boom period of the WWF, I don't think he was one of the most important characters. Sergeant Slaughter at number 42. I go back and forth with this one. He was part of the WWE during a boom period, but was he one of the more memorable characters? I'm not sure that he was one of the most memorable characters, to be honest. I thought he was a bit of a joke. Um, he did have a heel stint with a really, really good heel, which was the Iron Sheik, who definitely deserves to be on this list. Um, but and he drew big heat for doing that. But still, I just wouldn't put him on the list. Jack Briscoe, I haven't followed his career enough. Big Show, number 40, shouldn't be on the list. Jake the Snake Roberts, number 39, definitely should be on the list. One of the greatest talkers, one of the greatest, ring psychologists. And yeah, he should be on the list. However, I think he could go a bit higher. Personally, I think he could go a bit higher, considering who's on this list. Superstar Billy Graham. Yes. Considering I know that it's clear his influence upon like people like Hulk Hogan, and Jesse the Body Ventura, and other great superstars like him. Yeah, he should be on the list. Junkyard Dog. Junkyard Dog, number 37, I think that's okay. He should be on the list. But personally, I think Booker T should be on the list before him. And I think he's on the list because he's an African American superstar. And there's certain African American superstars that I would put before him. But Junkyard Dog was, as I understand it, a bit of a phenomenon, tiny bit before my time. Gorilla Monsoon, great announcer, and yeah, I'd put him on the list, but maybe at the lower end. Buddy Rogers, yes, he should be on the list. He did have a great impact in wrestling, and had a great influence on a lot of wrestlers as well. So he was the original Nature Boy. So yeah, I think that's fair enough, him being on the list. But that's only if there's space for him. Only if there's space for him, because his real contribution was his influence really on Ric Flair. Kurt Angle, this is a fucking joke. Number 34, Kurt Angle. What? I mean, what? One of the most underrated talkers. But even if you take the talking, which is my own personal opinion, even if you take the talking out of it, ring master, could make anyone look good in the ring. Had 5-star classics over and over and over again. He is in the same league as Shawn Michaels in terms of that wrestler you watch for wrestling. And unfortunately, I think him being such a good wrestler has actually taken from the fact that he was so charismatic and funny. I mean, like one of the funniest wrestlers of all time. I would put him up there with The Rock. I would put him up there with Stone Cold in terms of speakers on the mic. I mean, not as good as them, but like he's up there with them. Mick Foley, another joke, complete joke, number 33, way higher. I would argue Mick Foley should be in the top 10. Not only was he in the boom period of wrestling, not only was he one of the great talkers, one of the funniest entertainers, but he also had these indelible, images that he was part of, that are part of wrestling history. I mean, when you think of wrestling, you think of him coming off the Hell in a Cell cage. It's one of the first images that comes to mind when people think of wrestling. You think of him getting up, you think of the thumbtacks in the nose, you think of, it's just a joke. He should be in the top 10. Kurt Angle and Mick Foley ought to be, I think Kurt Angle, being objective, even though he's one of my favourite of all time, should be in the top 15, and Mick Foley should be in the top 10. Jimmy Snuka, 32. Considering my list, actually that's not a bad place for Jimmy Snuka. Considering what I would have for my list, that's not a bad place. But he could, again, same thing as Mick Foley, one of the most indelible images created in wrestling history is Jimmy Snuka flying off the cage. You know, everyone who's into wrestling remembers that. So it could be argued he could be a little bit higher, but I think that is his main contribution. Iron Sheik. Iron Sheik was one of the most hated villains of all time. So loud, it was deafening to hear people hating on Iron Sheik, and he was so good at it, and he was such a good in-ring performer. I would argue Iron Sheik could be higher than 31. Not much higher, but higher than 31. Pat Patterson shouldn't be on the list. Randy Orton shouldn't be on the list. Way too new. Like, what? Why is Randy Orton on the fucking list? I mean, the guy has been stale for the last, like, 8 years. And during the best time he had in the WWE, I wouldn't say he made that great an impact, to be honest. You know, I'd have to look at his title reigns and stuff like that, but I really don't think Randy Orton made that much of an impact during a period of wrestling that was actually very, very popular. We're talking about ratings in the 6.2s up to 7s. You know, he wasn't there then, you know, and he's been there since wrestling has been on a downward trajectory. So I don't see why Randy Orton's on this list. Way too new. Not that he's a bad wrestler or anything, just way too new. Not established enough, hasn't made enough of an impact as far as I'm concerned. What Randy Orton memory do you really think of? Like, tell me a Randy Orton memory, like, that everyone knows who's into wrestling. Classy Freddie Blassie. This is one that a lot of people, I've listened to their rants on this, and they say that he should not be on this list. I actually would argue he should be. Not a lot of people know about Classy Freddie Blassie because, you know, he obviously was a wrestler like during, I don't know, 40s or something like that. But the one thing I would say, I'm pretty sure this guy has influenced a lot of wrestlers. A lot of wrestlers. Why? Because he's one of the greatest talkers of all time. He's up there with The Rock in terms of one of the greatest stickmen of all time. Hilarious. Go back and look at his interviews before you judge him. He is a man, and I swear to God he did this. He out-talked Muhammad Ali in an interview. Classy Freddie Blassie, I'm sure of it, has influenced any of the stickmen. Any of the stickmen in this business has gone back to Classy Freddie Blassie's you know, interviews. He is one of the greatest of all time, no doubt about it. The Fabulous Moolah shouldn't be on the list. She should be on a chicks list or something. She's number 27. 26, Ted DiBiase, one of the greatest villains of all time. 26 is a good place for Ted DiBiase. $1 Million Man, hilarious. Really one of my favorites of all time. I'd put him higher, but on a list like this, 26 is good. 25 for Chris Jericho. Yeah, Jericho, somebody who I didn't like during the Attitude Era. I don't think he definitely shouldn't be above Angle. He definitely shouldn't be above Mick Foley. Chris Jericho, he really shouldn't. During the Attitude Era, during the most popular part, I mean, for fuck's sake, Mick Foley was part of the most rated, you know, the most viewed television segments in Raw history. How can Chris Jericho be above him? I'm not saying Chris Jericho shouldn't be 25, but he shouldn't be above Mick Foley, and he shouldn't be above Kurt Angle. And Kurt Angle was a bigger draw when they were in WWE together. He's done some good work though, and I do like Chris Jericho, but 25 is fine. He shouldn't be above Mick Foley or Kurt Angle. Bruno Sammartino should be way higher. Hulk Hogan should be number one. I mean, all honesty, should be number 1 or 2. It should be Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan, Rock, as far as I'm concerned. So Stone Cold number 1, Hulk Hogan number 2, Rock number 3. That's how I would do it objectively. And I'm not talking about, I do like all three. I really do like all three, but that is not why I'm saying that, because in fact The Rock is my favorite of all three of them. But in terms of draws in WWE history, Hulk Hogan at number 23 is a joke. He should be from 3 to 1 basically, and I'll continue in next video on this.